Now we come to the portion of the service before we get into our Bible study that we talk about some end times news, trends, and Bible prophecy as we do each week. And again, we want to welcome the online audience and the church and subscribers around the world. Thank you for joining us and partnering with us. And great comments that we get from time to time and week to week. And we get some negative comments from time to time as well. And but it is such an opportunity and such an honor and a privilege to have an opportunity to share the gospel to people around the world and to teach and encourage people and inform. So again, we thank you for your prayers and support allowing this ministry to continue. As things continue to unfold in Bible prophecy, the bits and pieces of the puzzle keep coming together. As we always say each week, pay attention to what's happening in the Middle East. As things are escalating to almost a breakneck speed. And this is where a lot of the mainstream news media is not going to keep you informed of what's really happening. But it's one of those things are going to start to heat up, especially in these last days. A report came out on Thursday out of the Israeli National News how Israel's presenting red lines to Russia on the Golan Heights and Iran. So the president of Israel met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Wednesday ahead of the planned Russian withdrawal in Syria. And he conveyed to the Russian leader that Israel's concerns about the Iranian activity in Syria and the active role of Hezbollah, a terror group that assumed in the Syrian civil war. So again, we're going to share another bit and piece of about Hezbollah and how they're actively pursuing chemical and dirty bombs in Syria right now. Israeli president emphasized Israel's concern, laying out the country's red lines regarding Syria. And so Israel would not accept the present Iranian armed forces near the Golan Heights. And this is the plan for Iran is to wipe Israel off the face of the map. So they're inching their way ever so closely to that goal. Speaking of Iran, the commander of the elite forces met secretly with Hamas. As you know, Hamas is usually in the PLO in the Palestine area. This one came out of the Jerusalem Post and how he reaffirmed Iran's commitment to Palestine resistance in a secret meeting with Hamas delegation to Iran on Wednesday. And during the meeting, the senior official updated Hamas's delegation about the expected developments within the region. Again, all these countries are going to come and attack Israel. This is what Psalm 83 talks about. This is what Ezekiel 38 and 39 talk about. So when we're talking about all these pieces of the puzzle and this news stuff, these are some of the pieces of the puzzle coming together. So we're starting to see these things unfold. We don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but we're seeing little by little it's happening. He also went on a different type of report, talks about how the commander assures Hamas Tehran will never cease fighting against Israel. The nuclear deal changed nothing. As we already told everyone before, this whole nuclear deal is just a farce. You know, basically it just relieved all these sanctions to put money back into Iran so they can build their nuclear weapons. Another report on Wednesday. This one came out on Friday, how Russia backs self-ruling Kurdish buffer state at Turkey's back door. So just after days of withdrawing some of their bulk of the Russian forces, Vladimir Putin is quietly redrawing the Syrian map on federal lines and planting Russian influences in this kind of the semi-autonomous region. So we're starting to see just more of a backdoor plan within Russia, within the region there. The Syrian Kurds are expected next to fight with Russian backing to connect these kind of three enclaves to a continuous self-ruled territory about this 500 kilometer long along the Turkish border. The Turkish president had warned repeatedly that they would not tolerate the establishment of the Kurdish self-rule in Syria, but would send his armies across the border to prevent it. So on a weekly basis, we're starting to see more of the escalation continuing throughout the Middle East in Turkey. Speaking of Turkey, they had reached a deal this last Friday, this crazy deal between the European Union. The European Union sealed a controversial deal with Turkey on Friday intended to halt illegal immigration flows to Europe in return of a $3 billion financial aid and political rewards. But it will not halt Muslim illegal immigration flow, but it will give 78 million Turkish Muslims visa-free entry into the EU as a fast track for the Turkey to become a member of the European Union. So that creates a whole nother ballgame of what's going to happen there. And it wouldn't be a surprise if the Turkish president is preparing to follow through with his threats to dump another 3 million people, Muslims, into Greece to flood throughout the European area. To continue with his hopeful of the Ottoman Empire invasion. So you can see these are some interesting things that are developing as we speak. As we mentioned about Hezbollah launching chemical weapons and dirty bomb programs secretly at a Syrian site. So again, they're infiltrating there. There's a place just about 30 kilometers west of Damascus that they have this little facility that they're developing all this sort of weaponry. And again, eventually they'll launch that into Israel at some point. And Hezbollah, as you know, is in Lebanon as well. So speaking of weapons, this report came out on Tuesday out of the Brett Barr report, how Iran could launch a 3-stage rocket at any minute. So this report came out of a interview that was done on CNN, and how CNN compares such a vehicle about a rocket that the North Korean employed to launch their satellite last month, if you remember, and notes that the successful test would give Iranian further insight into intercontinental ballistic missile technology. So they'd use the same type of technology to launch more missiles. So again, the threats, the wars and rumors of wars, the hostilities going to continue. On to a different issue, a national issue. This one is, it's not a surprise when you see what Obama does, but he wrote a check for $500 million to the UN Climate Change Fund in defiance against Congress. So again, these are sort of things they have to have a pass through Congress to vote on it, but he just bypasses, just like the same-sex marriage issue last year. He just bypasses the will of the people because the people do not want this sort of thing to happen. And again, the national debt of the U.S. is over $19 trillion. So it's just going to go bankrupt at some point. And again, there's so many other struggling communities that could definitely use that sort of money instead of going to climate change. And speaking of the economy, again, the signs are flashing that the dollar plunge has gone too far, too fast. So this came out of the Bloomberg report. And the third straight week of decline is triggering signals that the U.S. currency weakens may be overdone. So we're going to see more escalation within the economies around the world, how there's a depression going on in Brazil, which is going to be interesting, how the Olympics play out. But we're going to see just an unfolding of a financial collapse at some point. Speaking of finances, this is dealing with a drug issue that's going on, and I'll close with another one that's happening here in Australia. But the U.S. marijuana industry may reach $44 billion by 2020. $44 billion. So this current business legalization trend continues, an annual increase that they're expecting this year between a $14 to $17 billion just this year alone. And by 2020, another $24 to $44 billion. And you see this marijuana is that entry into drug, and it just continues to escalate there. And you see just the destruction it does to the people, the mentality of people. But it's interesting when you look at the drug use around the world. Australia, by the way, this report, maybe you saw this a couple of years ago in 2014, but frightening statistics, and this report came out of the Daily Telegraph, that Australia is leading the world in the use of the party drug Ecstasy. Ecstasy is the number one drug here in Australia. Didn't know that, but it's interesting. This is a report from the United Nations. And then third in methamphetamines, and then fourth in cocaine. It's amazing. I never thought Australia was that bad. It's so covered up in a lot of ways, but the more you dig into it, but also that the behind the scenes is the mafia. The mob is the one that brings the stuff into Australia. That's the entry point. It's coming from Europe, and Melbourne and Adelaide are the main entry points in here. On a monthly basis, all catch up with the police head inspector of City of Casey. We talk about the domestic violence, and we talk about the drug use. And ICE is one of the biggest problems in this area within Victoria. And Victoria is one of the highest domestic violence in all of Australia. And in fact, it is the number one state in all of Australia that has the highest domestic violence, drug use, and alcohol abuse as well. So, but this is one of those devastations that is happening in our own backyard here in Australia. So it's the ruining people's lives, ruining families and individuals, and but so much control from the mafia and the government, the corruption of the government, the rigged elections, and the list continues on. But ultimately, we're starting to see the New World Order eventually taking over, little by little. The corruption, the backdoor deals, allowing these sort of things to continue on. And it's sad to say it's going to get a whole lot worse. You know, we're starting to see this unfold within the school system and the so-called safe program, safe school program, which is introducing, even at the young age, of homosexuality and lesbianism and transgenderism and that sort of thing. So we need to be praying that much more. We need to be more informed. And as believers, we need to be ready. We need to be courageous and make our voices known and to live for Christ and be the best witness that we can be. Amen? That concludes today's update.